Good morning, everybody. Jason Meyer here with Morning Jumpstart, feedback for students. And this morning we're going to look at two charcoal 4-value compositions of the still life and then an oil study, color study of the still life. So how is everybody this morning? Susan, good morning. Good to see your sunshiny face. And we've got some charcoals here. So, I guess that's it for the introductions. Why don't we head right into the work and start getting warmed up. Let's see. We got to do a little dance here. Do-si-do. There we go. Miss Cindy's back there making sure everything's working. Thanks, babe. Alright, so for our first charcoal drawing, what I wanted to do today is, with this student in particular, I've asked them to, I've asked them just to be very clear on the values. And what I mean by clear on the values is that we try to work with 4 values. We call a number 1 value our white on our drawings. We call our number 2 value the tone of the paper. Number 3 value we want as a gray. And then a number 4 value we have a dark. Okay, so those are the 4 values, and what I wanted to talk today about on this one were the value 1, 2, 3, and 4, but the roles they play. Do we have those roles assigned correctly? We could also call the same thing the value order or the value sequences. Okay, so that's what we're going to focus on this particular composition today. So let's look and see what we've got. Let's see, Janny made it. Good morning, Janny. And Mr. Tom Dawson. Good to see you, my friend. Hope you're staying warm. Keeping that beautiful studio alive and well. Okay, so overall, I'm very happy. Let's look at our dark value, number 4. And we talked about letting that emerge, so nice. Talked about it keeping the same. We see it go through here and here. We got a little, I think I know what happened here. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but that needs to be dark. This, we need a little bit of dark on here as well. And then the shadows on the leaves carry the dark. Okay. So I think other than that, yeah, number 4, check. Good job. Good job. And what about number 3? Our number 3 value. You don't have to, but I'd like you to try this little trick next time. We talked about having a little lighter gray and a little darker gray. See if this little bit of darker gray and this little lighter gray, see what happens if you, whoops, don't do that. I don't even know what that is. If they do-si-do. Because if this, for instance, that value there, right, it looks almost too light back there, right? But what that'll do is that'll beef up my shadow. And maybe that's too light for back there. So we'd want it a little bit darker, but the point being that the kind of the lightest gray, instead of being, you're not going to see that, up in this front corner, it might be somewhere around some of these shadows to help pull them out. Okay? That might be a little bit advanced at this point, but let's just take a look at what that would do if we did that. And then if we took some of, these are actually kind of our darkest gray, if we let that come up front, then you see how that light starts to get compressed, and as we compress it, it looks a little bit more intense. Now, of course, we wouldn't want a hard edge like that. Wouldn't want a hard edge like that. And maybe not even that dark, but what happens if we... You see how that vase can become a little bit more powerful? Okay, so again, that just a little, that little tweak there will bring a lot of clarity. Now let's talk about one more little tweak. And again, this is in the same theme. Instead of lighter right here in front of the objects, what would happen if it was lighter like on the table behind the cast shadow? What that's going to do is, again, it'll pull your eye, because we know what's in front, right? What's in front is right in front of us. We don't really need a lot there, just the proximity is a pull there. But we need a reason to go back behind that shadow. And why would we want to go back behind that cast shadow? Well, that's going to add to that three-dimensional feel. Okay, and it'll instantly give your compositions more depth. Rather than seeming very shallow, this two-dimensional piece of paper is going to really start looking three-dimensional. All right, so Tanya is watching, hasn't been able to sign in yet. Okay, great, great. Claudia found you. Why? You make it like it's a big deal, Claudia. It's not like sometimes I show up on Facebook and sometimes I show up on YouTube and sometimes, no, it's true. I do sometimes show up in the wrong place. My bad, that happened last night. So glad you found me this morning. Let's see, Janny says, that totally makes sense. I like the way you break down the 1-2 values so clearly. All right, great. And again, if you're a beginner and this doesn't make, if this is a little too much, it's okay. Just get the orders right now. And we'll come back to this subtle little shift in the gray value. Okay. All right, Katie's here too. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So what else we got here? I think the other couple of things that I mentioned was we'd still like to have a shadow on this, even though it's going to be a little quieter. We'll make it quieter by the light not being so light, but we still want a shadow. And then we have to make sure, whoops, that we have the appropriately sized tools, that we keep these edges soft over here. Okay, so if we go from light to shadow, and that would include, I'm gonna have a hard time doing it, but let's see here. Let's see if I can get this done. Like that edge right there is just a little bit hard. See if we can't soften that up a little bit. Okay, and when we do, now again, we probably don't want on a white vase quite this dark, but just so we got the order right, we're gonna do this, and then a little bit of trick here, not really a trick, but the top of, this is a top plane versus a side plane on the vase. So this top plane, that light will so there'll be a cast shadow down over the vase, but it'll break a little bit on that shoulder, if that makes sense. And then on the top there, it'll go all the way across again. So I hope that made sense there. Let's go over that one more time. So if we were going around this thing is back and it comes forward. And then at the junction here of this plane and this plane, that corner is where we'd like the highlight. Okay, just FYI. But this light will continue over this shoulder a little bit. All right, so there's a little zig, and then at the top plane, that light will go all the way across. Now sometimes, I don't know how big you're working, sometimes it's a little small to get that detail, but just for clarity, want to make sure we've got those things there. Does that you see the difference there? So the shape of that shadow is not as how should we say, descriptive. Not quite as descriptive. So with the light, if I say, oh look, this shoulder is facing this plane, so the light's going to continue here, but once we get that's going to cast a shadow onto this, and if we curve that around, right, and then we need our soft edge. Right, all of that will be soft edge, and then this one would be a hard cast shadow. And then up top, the very top, that light wouldn't stop at the shadow, but it would go across it like that. Okay. So I hope that helped. But huge improvement since we last talked and saw, and it's looking very good. It's looking very good. Claudia, it's always, I gotta keep you on your toes, Claudia. Talking about trying to find me. I don't know where I am half the time, so how am I gonna give you directions to where I'm at? Well, where we're strong in some areas, weaker in others. All right, so great job on this. Great job. Let's go. So before, and so what did we talk about? We talked about amazing difference. Okay, good. So Tanya was able to see that. We got a new window. Nope. So we talked about maybe taking the dark gray and putting it more up front, and this lighter gray kind of in the back, right next to the shadows, in order to get us to go not to the objects, but behind the objects. Okay, that'll make a big difference. We may have been a little bit too light there, because as you move a value, this value here looks one way, but if we put it back here, it's going to actually look a lot brighter. And that's just because it's next to the dark. So we may have to darken that value just a little. Okay, and then soften some of those form shadow edges. Great job. Great job. All right, let's go to one more compositional drawing before we get into some color studies. So on here, what I'd like to talk about is clarity versus vagueness, because that's one of the themes to make your work more interesting. Is you don't want everything crystal clear. If everything's crystal clear, nothing's crystal clear. In other words, we don't know where to look. And if we don't know where to look, then we're shooting our attention to like every square inch of the canvas. The canvas is going to lose its intensity. But if we take the awareness that we have and that we're going to give to this canvas, and we send you to a very particular spot, one way to think about this is, as the viewer's looking at this, are we asking them to look here with a beautiful color, and we're asking them to look here with a soft edge, and we ask them to look here with a dark, and we ask him to look here with a light, and here, 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 and of course, and here, and here, and here. They're exhausted. They're exhausted. So, our job as artists is to take that little limited amount of attention that they have for this work and to send their direction, all of their energy down a particular eye path. Okay? And that's where the clarity and the vagueness can really help us out. So you've done a great job here keeping all of this vague. All right, really nice job. There's no doubt about it. That's a second, first. I love the differences there, right? So you got some really great things happening here. Okay, but kind of like that shift in the gray in that last one, let me talk about where we might get a little more clarity. So there's no doubt that we're getting over here. There's no doubt, right? Our attention is going there. But the problem is it's not stable. It's not grounded. Okay? So what if we take that idea that we just talked about, that being maybe a little bit lighter in the background, oh, and I can see you got a little bit here, there, so that's good. But you see, we can't see that because it's the same as everything else. And what if we had just a bit? Cast shadows are a great place to be able to get a little bit of this clarity. But someplace, you see how I just gave, okay, there's light in front of the jar, there's shadow, and then we have light behind the jar on the table. Do you see that difference? Now again, we don't necessarily have to have it everywhere. I probably would not put it up here, and it's probably a good idea to let go of it here. But where we want you kind of looking, you're going to want a little bit of that. A little bit. Okay, we got a big yes on that. Good, good, good job. And that's like one thing that would be a huge difference on there. Okay. And then I want to take a minute and talk about one other thing. And I'm going to talk about this in the abstract, but I want to look at a couple of things. So if we have a light-dark sequence, we'll work up here. So if we say that's the form shadow, or the shadow on the object, and this is a cast shadow, and then what? So I would say this is the shadow, is number 4 for opaque. Wow, that's a cue. Let's try that again. Opaque. That's a number 4. Well, we're going to treat it as a transparent. We haven't added the transparency yet. But the grape. Do you see the difference there? That shape from that shape? Now that's just the shadow. There's all kinds of other things. So we've got the same shape, the same shape, the same shape. And then over here we started to do it. But the purpose of the grapes is to get this shape versus that shape, so that our dark shapes and our light shapes are more interesting. Okay? So I'm going to mess up the vagueness here a bit. But let's see how that would look. And then if we want clarity, what we're going to do here is go somewhere inside and get that negative shape. Right, so we've got the grape. We're going to extend the cast shadow. Make that a clean line. And that next grape, and see how we've left a negative shape there. Okay, and then if we keep coming, and then if I always like, instead of having these things butt up one against the other, like I would like my orange to come over here so that I can have a negative shape down there, and I can get a cast shadow there, which will make that negative shape stand out. Okay, so then that would look, oops, if we move that right over here like that, then that, you see what happens there is then that grape interrupts and makes that light shape jig a little bit. So that makes for a more interesting shape. And now I know this is going to be quiet coming out. I'm just talking about shapes here. And then, you know, the highlights, if you have the highlight, boom. I'm not going to be able to get small enough here, I don't think. There we go. You see, so now you've got this kind of light next to that kind of light versus this light to this light. So practically what you have here is here the difference is bigger, and right, there's just a little more clarity in shape, right? And then over here the difference is smaller. And again, the whole purpose of the grape is so that we have a different kind of dark shape to play with. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. That's a little bit on the deep end there, but it's basically the principle of everything. The bigger the change, the bigger the experience. Let's see, let's not do all that. Let's see if we can come up here, get rid of that. All right, so one last time, what might all of that look like together? And again, this might be a little bit rough, but I like this dark gray you have here. I know it's hard all the time and probably don't want to be this heavy-handed, but let's go just from top to bottom here. There's no change. You see that? There's no change anywhere, top to bottom on this front edge. And what am I doing here? Just kind of darkening the edge, which is going to compress the light, which does what? Makes everything more intense, right? Because it's sending our focus to more particular places. We're not having to meander and find our way. And then from here, Let's try to take what you have on here. So my dark marks then don't have to be real clear. I can even smudge that out a little bit more as I start for that vagueness versus the clarity. And then maybe there's a little more clarity on this one. And now that negative shape always works. The difference is do we call that light? Or do we, it's like that's blasting them away. But even just putting that dark there on that gray, it gives it a little bit of hold without being too much. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. Woo, where did that come from? Do you see that? So very, very good. And then like I said, if we clean up a couple of these shadows here in the middle. And again, we don't have to go back behind that shadow with the bright light, just with something a little bit lighter than what's there. For a little clarity. Do you need it everywhere? No, but I think a little bit here will pay off. And then I think just darkening these grapes here at the beginning, right, changing that sequence will just do tremendous things for that. And then if you can, I know sometimes it's hard, just gray these edges off. I don't know if you were able to see it, but last night we looked at Thomas Eakins' Chess Players, and it was out of the frame and you could see the white all along the edges. And it's actually really distracting. Once I covered that up, the piece got like 1,000 times more intense. So these little distractions on the edges, they're stealing a lot. They're stealing a lot from our precious little babies here. So just be careful. Be careful on that. All right. But good job again on the clarity versus the vagueness. Nice, nice, nice. Let's see. Oh, all right. It's true, values, yep. Higher green. Oh, okay, so this is a good question here. So Tom asked, using the entire gray lane helps the movement. And let's see, let's go back to this one, I think. Yeah, so the idea with our values is nothing is really absolute here. But our number 4 value, our dark, should provide stability for us. So that's going to translate into the least amount of movement, right, within the lane, right? What do I mean by that? Well, we can go from lighter gray to darker gray, but we don't want to confuse the gray with our dark, right? Our dark can be a darker dark to a little bit lighter, but again, we want to make sure dark stays dark and doesn't get confused with gray. So that's that lane. So number 4, we want the least amount of movement in that lane. Now number 3, what does number 3? Number 3 is vagueness. Number 3 is air. Number 3 is background. Number 3 is don't look here. So as we go through the world, we're not focusing on everything all around us all the time, but we're eliminating a million things around us. And it's not that we don't know that they're going on, but they're just very vague. Very vague. So, you will have movement here, and unless number 3 runs into something else, you basically want to think about no edges. Right? I mean, when's the last time you were in some really edgy air? And if you were in edgy air, were you taking deep breaths and saying, oh, I don't need to? No, if the air is edgy, it's hazardous. So there's some movement, and that will add tremendous movement. And to illustrate that, what would happen if we took just, a beautiful number 4 tone here, gray, whoops, and we just completely flat. That's what we mean about the movement of the gray. Like if I just say, okay, this is my gray, oh my gosh. Are you sure you don't want a garden or something? But so that's what he's talking about, the movement. Bye, Claudia. Thank you. Okay, so number 3 is vagueness, movement. Number 2 is the light. Well, and our light's the melody. So number 2, what happened? There we go. So number 2, our light will have the most movement. Why do we say that? Well, it could start with just a quiet highlight. It could start with a quiet little negative shape here. Get quiet there. And then we're going to grow to our number 2 climax, right? So you want the feeling of the most movement in your light. Light, number 2. Somebody needs to go back to writing school. Light number 2 is the most movement. Gray on this side of it. Then it has all of that room to see if I can remember how to spell boogie, to get down, get funky, right? Boom, within that lane. And so we want that light to have the most movement. It'll have the feeling of the most movement. Technically, well, yeah, just the feeling. Let's leave that there. All right, I hope that helps. Okay, so let's get into some color. Who's ready for some color? Color, color, color. All right, so let's reset here for just a second. Take a break, give your brain a break, and we can re-engage. And now we're going to look at that same composition as a color study. Okay, in class yesterday we talked about the colors that we're using on this palette. Being a yellow ochre, which is somewhere down here. We got a cad orange and a cad red light. And we have a burnt umber, which is a dark umber somewhere down in here. And we have a permanent green light, which is a bright yellow green. And then we have one blue. Right? And of course our black and white is neutral. So are we evenly spaced out here? No. Is this a blue painting? I hope not, because you're going to have a hard time with those colors, right? Look, most everything is right here on that warm side, and then we have this single blue. So we've got a lot of variety here to jump around, and then we're going to gray everything down in a particular way, right? If we had all these blues on here, all the way over to purple and green, it's going to be a big mess. So the first thing to realize in color is, just like value, it's not about getting every one, but it's about organizing your color. All right, so with that in mind, let's take a look at your palette. So we have white, we have yellow ochre, cadmium orange, cad yellow light, burnt umber, black, permanent green light, raw umber, and then maybe you're just out or whatever, but there's cobalt blue on there too. So that's the palette. All right, we've got our number 4 mixed up. All right, number 3 value. Over here, this is a little bit light there for a gray, I think. And I think that's going to show up in the paintings. And then we've got color. Right? This looks like shadow to me. A nice shadow. Or maybe that's a gray background. So number 2 here. And number 1 there. Okay, so very, very good. We got everything cleanly. We've got those values separated out. And forget right? You know, outside of the palette that it's sitting on, that gray, these are the colors of our painting. Right? So are you going towards your light and your color even now? What I'm seeing is that this looks way more powerful than this. Do you see that? So believe it or not, these will get a little bit of power, or a little more power, by adding a bit of white to them rather than being pure. Okay? And I'm a little concerned about that value. Those look like those might match. So, and I don't know if that was what you used on your painting or whatever, but just general thoughts. And it's more just to show you how I'm looking at the palette and judging the colors. Okay? All right. So, here we go. Here we go, here we go, here we go. So what do you see? What's happening here? What's happening here? So you guys remember where we want to go? Are we going there? We're close. Close, close. I gave you a second to look at this because I think this one little change will be huge here. See, that's even too dark. That's even too dark. But if we just darken this down a little bit, I think that's going to make a huge change in that. And then what you want to do too is, this feels a little out of place. So one thing you can do is that kind of that non-color of the background or the color of the leaves. What you want to do is just sneak a little bit of that, right? So if the light's coming down this way, then this is going to be the light side over here. As it turns away from the light right there, what happens? Well, it gets a little grayer, or it might have some transparency here. But let's see what happens as we zoom back out if we just, you see how, oh, okay, so now that could kind of be in there. And then what if we took just a little bit of this, and the same idea, just spilt a little reflection onto the table. See how that sits a lot quieter in there now? Kind of subtle, but that's what we want to do. And let's see. The other thing is, this is a little bit tricky, but if we're going to have a warm gray background, we're probably going to be, oh, come on, what's happening? There we go. We're probably going to be happier with more of kind of a burnt umber over here than a black. And this could be the photo, I don't know. Sometimes photos don't always. But I just want to give that a little bit of warmth. Versus that coolness. Again, kind of compressing that light a little bit. And this is a color study, so we're not supposed to be finishing these or anything, for those of you outside of class wondering. But again, it's an opportunity for me to show and demonstrate some things. Right? Look how much brighter, right, that ginger jar is. And now, ooh, I can even run through that a little bit if I wanted to gray one of those off. Not that I wanted to gray that high one off, but just to show you how that they affect each other, right? By pulling them just a little closer together. And again, that movement we talked about. Something like that. And then with the orange, and again, I can see you grade and darken this off, but we could even do some more. All right, I can let it get a little richer, but go darker. And then the same with that shadow back here. Instead of black, can we go just slightly warmer? You know, that little cad red in with the black, or the... So in order for this to cast a shadow there, they've got to be on the same plane. So this is going to be behind that. And so if it's behind it, well, I guess it could. But it's just got to be close. So you just want to watch that. But now, wow. Man, look at those fireworks going off now. Look at those fireworks. Yes, okay. All right. So any questions on this, Susan? One more thing. And again, it could be, I would go even a little bit darker on my white, so that let's see. And if we want this to pop, you know, we can even go a little bit darker. Let's see if this works. That's 2. Like, I don't know, just testing out here. But you see how that white would really pop off of that? Right, got the, oh, and yeah, the gecko there. So we want to get some cast shadow from that, the shadow side, and some cast shadow on that gecko too. Right, so maybe, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. I get so excited about all this stuff. It's hard to slow down. It's hard to slow down. Right, so we could still, I mean, look, that's pretty dark there, and we could come up a little bit, but we could still be off of white and come down. And again, that thing's going to get brighter. It will get brighter. Let's see, by giving this a little bit more color and go a little bit richer, so I can play that color and value off one another. So the problem is they're two exactly the same, and nobody wins here. You see that? Within this thing, you know, our ginger jar is not winning. Nothing's winning. And when nothing wins, there's confusion because, oh, should I do this? What should I be looking? I'm so uncomfortable. I don't know what the protocol is. Okay, so we just want to clearly explain it to him. So let's look. Let's go darker and grayer there. Now I think this is way too dark, but sometimes when I'm having a hard time getting to where I need to go, I overstate it. Now, when I do this, what question am I asking? Hint, it's got nothing to do with the leaves. Well, it does, but in a backwards way. I'm asking, does my ginger jar do what I need it to do? Yeah. All right, well, how are we going to continue that light? Ha 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 ha, here we go. Here we go, creative problem solving. So what if we took the light here and then used that as a highlight? Right, so it's a little bit hard to see on that front leaf, and part of it's because these are stacked on top of one another. But if that was over here or something, then that white, and then I would darken or gray somewhere behind it so that that light showed up. You guys understand what I'm saying? So I would move this leaf so that the highlight could run off the light like that. And then we could put a shadow on it. This is going to be too heavy, but we're going to do it anyway. Maybe that'll work. Let's see, no, it's up here. So I'd move that leaf from that first position to maybe that position for the whole reason of extending the light from here through there to get a good shape. And then, you know, this highlight on the grape and that, I also want to coordinate those things right, with that. So I'm sure you're thinking about it. So this could become much more dynamic if we took this and just moved it a little bit that way. Do you see that? Because why does it become more dynamic? Because then this becomes that. Let's see. The leaf used to be there, but oh yeah. So Susan said the leaf used to be there, but she moved it to fix another problem, and that's so often the case. You're solving one problem and then you create another, but that's the joy too in the game there. All right, great. Last thing I would say, Susan, you might consider this would make a stronger painting, but again, it complicates things, so I didn't introduce it in the class in general. But we could keep the grapes like a dark accent, just slightly darker than the shadow color. Right? So more of a dark. And then for their shadow colors, let's look at the clementine, particular. You could go again just more into kind of a warmish. It's subtle. It's subtle. But right over here it's very subtle. You guys see that? When I put it on top of that shadow. But when I put it next to the grape, what it's going to do is it's going to make that separation stronger. Because it's that black to that. It's just kind of a half a step, but it's one of those half a steps that can, you know, really spark up or liven up a painting. And then over here with the white, we might have to come a little bit more. And these are always tricky because there's not too cool. Right, maybe something a little bit more like that. And then what will save that white? Ooh, easy, 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 fella. Nice soft edge there. But some reflected light up in there. Some nice, warm. Okay, you see how that can help with that shadow. So again, Susan, well, maybe I'm throwing too much at her. I don't think so. She likes it. All right, good, 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 good. So again, that's a little bit of a higher level critique there, but I think you can see the difference would be really big. And since we're doing this here, let's go ahead and, right, you see as we darken that down, even as we get richer up here in the front, those leaves, how much stronger the focus gets there. Then the question is, what are we going to do about that? It kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. Well, you guys know we can do two things. We can take a little bit of this warm and just get a flavor of it into our green. So now those colors are closer. Again, just a little taste, just a little taste, just a little taste. And then why don't we do the opposite as well? Let's just take a bit of this green and get it into the orange. So now those colors are closer together. And you think, oh, I don't want to kill my orange, but if your orange is sticking out too much, right? Because that's still plenty bright. Maybe still too much, but that's the sequence there. All right. Hey, Tanya, you made it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. All right, so I'm going to give you guys just a minute if you have any last minute questions. If not, we'll wrap this up. So let's see what a before and after here looks like. Okay, so we talked about that background maybe being too light, just because. And again, if the photograph is not representative of the painting, just the same things apply, but maybe the degree is a little bit different. Okay, or if it looks fine, it's not this big of a difference. Go off what it looks like. Okay, because you can see here how the leaves don't really separate from the ginger jar, and the background is just so close, it's kind of fighting us a little bit. So with the background, once we darken, then that kind of separates things off. And then if we just kind of dim the lights a little bit. Now you may not want the lights dim that much, and you can bring them, again, it's a matter of taste for each individual artist. But just get us to where we want to go. Don't have us look in every little corner, nook, and cranny. Give us a couple of big points, a good color, some decent shapes moving around. Put a smile on our face and let us move on. All right, so great, thank you. All right, it looks like everybody's good. So what is today? Today is Tuesday, which means there's Sketch Club tonight on Facebook. Boom. And I want to apologize. Last night I showed up on Facebook for Masterworks, inadvertent. What can I say? But tonight we'll be on Facebook. Hopefully Izzy will be feeling better, will be there. And we'll do work 10 more minutes on the sketches we started on Sunday. And we've been talking about the cylinder. All right. Till then, let's see. I guess I could show you guys my face. There we go. Thank you guys, everybody. Hope you have a great day. Go be beautiful and create something. All right. Till next time. Bye-bye.